Order, starting with the roll call.
Eric?
Like
MC
here. Ann?
Here.
All those
Jeannie?
are like,
Here.
Steve?
Here.
Larry? Here. Daisha?
Stacy's not
Stacy?
here. Stacy is here.
Stacy's here? Okay. Daisha is absent.
Daisha's absent.
Yeah. And our two student representatives are here. Thank you for coming tonight. So, I don't know where I got that. Notice the meeting?
The meeting was properly noticed.
Okay. I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
If you would all join me in standing to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, tonight we have a spotlight on learning from Asa Clark Middle School. Did you want to do some introduction, Mike?
I'll just turn it right over to Mr. Pizzo.
All right, thanks for having us tonight. I wanted to do something a little bit different tonight. I would say in my 7 years in Pewaukee, the services provided by our school counselors have changed tremendously. We went from primarily a reactionary-based student counseling program to trying to do a lot of proactive things for our students. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Allison Prather and Brianna Rembert, who are the two school counselors at Asa Clark Middle School, and they're going to explain a little bit about some of the measures and things that we have in place to help support our students.
Good evening, everyone. If you can hear me, otherwise I can use the microphone for sure as well.
Probably should for the
Sure.
one.
Okay, you
It's
got
also
it.
live, 'cause it's a live stream.
So, as mentioned, my name is Allison Prather.
And I'm Brianna Rembert.
And we thank you for the opportunity to come here this evening to present on some of the work that we are doing in that Tier 1 kind of level intervention, specifically related to social and emotional learning. Yep, sorry about that. So when we look at what we're doing, we really want to provide kind of this overview in breaking it down as far as what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, as well as what's the success criteria that we're looking at. So the what is really providing our students with an overview of meeting their social and emotional wellness through our Future Ready lessons. Additionally, the why is really kind of wanting to establish a proactive SEL kind of lesson plan in order to promote a positive school environment for students where they can feel safe, they can feel supported, and ultimately that they can learn about their own well-being and how that is crucial for them as they continue their years beyond just the middle school level. How we're doing it is we're really utilizing our student services staff. We're using our teachers as well as our students, and we have weekly lessons that are infused into their flex periods that we will do either pre-recordings as well as live and in-person sessions. And then our success criteria is really looking at kind of that student perception. So where do students feel like they are growing when it comes to the CASEL competencies as well as our graduate profile competencies?
Okay, so we are going to focus a little bit more on going in depth of what are we doing. So Future Ready lessons, as Allison mentioned, are that Tier 1. So they're universal. They're for all students at the middle school. And it focuses on incorporating or integrating 3 different areas. And the first is the social emotional learning part. Those competencies identified by CASEL. So self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. And making sure we're integrating those competencies and helping students strengthen their skills within the school environment and also those partnerships between home and the community. The other part it pulls in is the academic and career planning. So providing students the opportunity to learn more about themselves and then also providing them the experiences and getting them the opportunity to know what's available to them in middle school, high school, and then post-secondary as well. And then the last piece is that graduate profile competencies, making sure we are supporting the district's mission and integrating those graduate profile competencies or those 6 C's and highlighting those throughout our lessons. All right, so I'm not going to go through this chart in depth. We would be here a long time tonight. But here is an overview of where we've come from the past 5 years. So the first year, or 5 years ago, really focused on just ACP lessons, so that academic and career planning. Those were lessons that were in person and were delivered by our classroom teachers. Year 4, or 4 years ago, we started to incorporate more and identify those SEL lessons, ACP, and then also focus on that community building through those team building activities. SEL lessons were delivered by the school counselor, and then our ACP lessons continue to be delivered by our classroom teachers. 3 years ago, right before we started to think about the planning and transition of 6th grade joining us at the middle school, we took more of a team approach at the middle school. So we still had ACP lessons and SEL lessons, but it was delivered by almost all of us in the school. So our SEL lessons were delivered by our student services staff, including our administration, and then also our classroom teachers as well, but they were delivered during those extended learning days that we have at the middle school. And then last year, we were kind of navigating some changes, right? We welcomed 6th grade into the middle school, and then we were also had some mitigations in place due to COVID. So we had to get flexible. But last year was the year we really transitioned into calling them future ready lessons, and then really highlighting the connection between the 3 areas that I mentioned before. So SEL, ACP, and those graduate profile competencies. So those lessons were pre-recorded by our student services staff, and then they were facilitated in the classroom by students' flex teachers. And then this year, or where we're currently at, is we have more future ready lessons that we're delivering. And again, they are being pre-recorded and delivered by our flex teachers. However, last year, we gathered feedback from staff, and they thought about the importance of our students having more face-to-face time with our student services staff. So once a month on a rotation basis, student services or our students are receiving a live lesson from our student services staff. All right, so kind of going a little bit deeper into the what or how are we doing this. I know it's really small on the screen, but here is an overview of the lessons that we have delivered up to this year up to this point in time. So you'll start to see that it starts to differentiate between each grade level. So as we continue to review and revise and gather feedback from families and from staff and our students, we are really trying to meet the needs of our students and where they're at developmentally. So on the screen there, you'll see the different lessons and then different competencies that they tie to between our CASEL competencies and then also that graduate profile work.
Okay, so the why. And I think we could probably spend like a half an hour, and if not longer, on the why as far as what the research says. So we're going to start kind of from that macro level or more of a nationally based kind of data approach. So according to CASEL, there's really kind of 5 components that really help students bolster or improve in various areas in terms of their skill set. The first one is really being that increased positive perception. So through this SEL learning and as it's incorporated into our weekly lessons, is students are able to have better attitudes about themselves and about others. They're able to have a more healthy kind of outlook or really increasing that self-identity in a more positive way. Additionally, their attitude towards school, as mentioned, is also something that they really just tend to have a better view or outlook on. When it comes to behavior, we're kind of looking at it from a lot of different ways. Behavior in terms of empathy towards others, really trying to take a step back and put themselves in other people's shoes. Ultimately, too, is looking at behavior in terms of just decrease in the number of classroom disruptions or behavioral referrals that we're seeing. Academic performance, there is an increase in terms of their commitment towards school. Also, there actually is an increase in their academic performance by 11%, and this is in terms of achievement tests as well as grades. So the research is showing that students that receive SEL lessons, they do tend to slightly have an improvement in their overall kind of academic perception compared to their peers that don't have any SEL lessons incorporated into their curriculum. As far as stress management, they have lower levels of distress. They're really able to kind of just better manage their emotions. And ultimately, too, is just they're not internalizing their problems as much. They're more able to communicate what's going on in their lives to others. And finally, that long term is that research does show that students are able, those that do receive an SEL lesson or have lessons incorporated into their curriculum, is that ultimately there's a positive correlation in terms of strong social and emotional assets and their overall well-being. And that is years beyond the time in which they actually had access to these SEL lessons. In terms of our data, so kind of really looking at it from a building level, when we look at our Tier 1 data, as Brianna mentioned before, is we were looking back at our Future Ready lessons from 2020 and 2021. And ultimately what you'll see is that this is feedback from students as well as their parents and guardians who filled out a survey at the completion of their Future Ready conferences. So in terms of the three areas that you'll see is that these were the ones that both students and parents and or guardians indicated that were some of the most important areas of growth for their students. So goal setting was one, personality style, as well as just having an introduction to career clusters. In terms of office visits, and we see this as being Tier 1, it's universal because it is accessible to all of our students. And this is data from this year. So as you can see is that if you look at 2020, 2021, is we had about 352 students, individual students that came and visited our office. And that was up until mid-January. When we compared it to this year, we had nearly 700. So we had 2 times the amount of students coming into our student services office for assistance on a lot of different just struggles, areas that they just needed assistance with. Also, you'll see that we had 393 total referrals that were made outside of our office. So this is coming from parents, it's self-reports, it's from teachers, it's from you name it. So ultimately, it's from others that are trying to get in contact with us in terms of just trying to put on our radar students that might need some assistance. So for us, this data ultimately is showing that both students and or staff are having this recognition through some of the lessons or through some of the learnings that are happening in our social, emotional, or future ready lessons that are being employed in the classroom. And then from a Tier 2 and Tier 3 data point, we've actually seen a pretty significant increase on our individual student check-ins. So our number of regular check-ins, we've seen an increase of at least 10 students per year in comparison to last year. So what we kind of feel, again, is what we mean by regular check-ins is that there's just a consistency behind it. So this could be weekly check-ins, it could be bi-weekly check-ins, but ultimately we have really this proposed meeting with students that's reoccurring. So when we look at this, is we kind of look at the time crunch that can happen when it comes to these number of regular check-ins. And with our Tier 2 is you're really trying to evaluate what else could we do in terms of that proactiveness that Anthony had talked about for some maybe small group lessons as well. So ultimately, we want to be able to proactively identify these lagging skills in students, and we feel like that definitely comes from just the incorporation of Tier 1 level interventions, because we can really support all students in terms of their emotional development, their behavioral development, and also their social development. We can help foster that positive environment for students, that they can feel respected, that they can feel safe, that they can feel supported, that they can feel encouraged. And ultimately, too, is this recognizing that we have a universal need to really support that overall well-being of our students.
Okay, so how do we know future ready lessons are impactful? And Allison will talk in just a minute here. We feel that this is an area that we can grow in, but with the data that we do have, you'll see that Tier 1 data that we highlighted. So earlier in the fall, or this fall, our administration gathered feedback from students about their perception or, the usage of flex time. And when we look at care, that's specifically related to those ACP SEL future ready lessons. While students reported, wanting less time for ACP and SEL, it's also the graduate profile competencies that they reported the most growth with in just that fall time. Also, you know, we talked about earlier too the importance of that partnership between home and school and the community. We feel it's important to highlight that 96% of students at the middle school last year had a parent or guardian participated in the Future Ready conference that happened at the end of the year. The Future Ready conference is designed to engage students and families and teachers in that conversation about their future ready journey and give students the opportunity to reflect on where they've been that year and where they are looking forward to.
And as Brianna mentioned, is that this is really an area that we want to evaluate, that we know we need to dig in further. So for future implications, we're kind of, thinking big picture. What are the possibilities of what we could do in terms of tier 1 level support for SEL, support for our students? So first, we recognize that we have a need to really routinely measure the growth of our students, being more consistent and getting feedback, from students in terms of their perceptions and their experiences when it comes to the future ready lessons. With this comes challenges as well as opportunities. Challenges being is that we need to find an assessment tool that's actually going to measure what we want it to measure. We need it to be reliable. We need it to be valid. And ultimately that takes time, that takes staffing, who's going to research it, who's going to review it, who's going to deploy it, who will disaggregate the data. So all of that comes, with as part of that challenge piece. We also see that there's opportunities, though, when it comes to trying to really assess the impact that this Tier 1 SEL framework can have. And what we look at it as is just perhaps using teacher-reported feedback, student-reported feedback, and parent or guardian-reported feedback. Teacher-reported feedback would be wonderful because they see these students the most. They see them in a social context, and they can really provide what is kind of normal behavior and maybe what just seems a little off. But again, with teachers, as we know they're already strapped for time. There would need to be adequate amount of training. So again, kind of that capacity piece is something that we need to be mindful of. As far as parent or guardian reported feedback, this is really going back to what Brianna had talked about, is really strengthening that partnership between home and school, is that ultimately parents can be informed on the things that we are teaching their kids, and they can infuse it or really talk about it at home. What are some of the challenges and the hardships that students face outside of the school, and how can they really transfer that knowledge that they're learning here into their everyday routines? And then ultimately that student-reported feedback. Who better than students to tell us what they're feeling about it? Ultimately, it gives them ownership. It gives them an opportunity to really express things that are going well for them or where they really kind of see the growth is happening. It's also a valuable starting point for us because it really helps us also identify what are the loopholes, what are we missing based on what students are telling us. We're also, kind of big picture is, could there be an SEL course that we could incorporate instead of one of our maybe flex periods? So again, working with our administration to really have a concrete curriculum that has, just different assessment kind of pieces infused into it. Perhaps we have a capstone project. Can we do a service-based learning opportunity so that students, when they acquire this knowledge, they ultimately can then transfer it out. They can see some of the product from what they're learning. And we also hope that could also help improve and increase some of that student engagement. So when we're looking at this is longitudinal. What are the possibilities? Where could we really go from here? So questions?
Open it up to the board. Steve?
I'll ask a question. I'd like to direct this to Katie and Anthony. Are there any changes in the culture of the school that you attribute to the work that's being done here? Do you notice anything?
Well, I think there's definitely a larger focus on that supporting our students from a social and emotional standpoint. I think it's tough because I think at the same time that this transition has happened, our kids have also been through, for all intents and purposes, a pretty traumatic experience.
Yeah.
So I think their needs have risen as a result of that. So I think this is one hand in hand, and it's good timing, to be frank.
Good question. Anyone else? Larry?
Go ahead. Oh, Shayla first.
I just wanted to make a comment. So, as kind of like a senior, it took me kind of like this year to realize, that my counselors are such a great resource for me, especially when it comes to, applying to college. And I think one of the things that you mentioned was that students have been reaching out a little bit more to you because they're aware that you are a resource. And I think that's just so important, especially at the middle school being like those formative years, and that they're taking the time to reach out to you and connect with you. I think that's so important, and I think that's so indicative of that the work that you're doing, engaging with them, is truly working.
Larry?
So I have a couple comments maybe and a question. So one, I really like it, and Danielle always knows that I like this stuff. When you linked in the graduate profile kind of concepts that are there, I think that helps reinforce it for the students and to help them develop a greater in-depth understanding of what that's all about and how it applies to their regular daily life, if you will, as you go forward with it. The second question I have, and it's just, maybe it's more of a intellectual or just something I'm trying to get in my head around. When you talked about sort of the increased academic or improved academic performance, what components or what aspects of the SEL learning do you attribute that to? I mean, what is it that the students experience or feel that results in better academic performance? Good one.
So I think one area is really just we overthink it sometimes or overlook it. And to me, I think it's executive functioning skills is one piece of it. Ultimately, being able to manage your time in an appropriate way, organization. I am coming from a higher education perspective as well. That was my previous life, and I saw so many incoming freshmen not have that skill set. And so I think that when you kind of focus on some of the basic skills and helping them really hone in and fine tune those, you're going to see it trickle into those other areas. I also think in terms of how to appropriately manage anxiety, how to approach stress. You have that big project that's coming up. So how can you feel more confident going into it instead of just having that, oh my goodness, what's gonna happen, kind of all or nothing thinking. So I think those are kind of two components or kind of two pieces that I would say is helping to attribute to that increased academic performance.
I think just adding on to that too, right? Like CASEL includes that social awareness and relationship skill piece. So, encouraging students to engage in perspective taking or empathy or conflict resolution. And, through the fostering those social relationships, I think that helps support students and create and establish an environment where students want to be and where they feel more that they're able to engage in their learning.
So, another question I have is, and this is kind of maybe a part of it too, relative to the student's receptivity and or the parent/guardian receptivity to this material and content. I mean, how do you kind of keep them engaged in it and or motivate them to be engaged in it in some way, shape, or form? So.
And like we said, based on the feedback we gained this fall is that students want less time with it, but it's a growth for them. So I think that's an area of growth for us too, is really digging into the data. We gather data at the end of each year through the Future Ready conferences of, what was meaningful for students and highlighting that more and making sure we have more of that, but then also addressing the need within the current school year of what are they looking for, what are the needs that they feel that will most help them grow. And then that parent and guardian partnership. We have bi-weekly parent communication letters, and every once in a while we'll put in an update about future ready lessons. But again, I think those are two areas of growth too for us, is how do we increase that student engagement, and then also how do we continue to strengthen that partnership between school and home.
I would just say is that we also try to pivot when possible. So if we recognize at a grade level that there might be a concern or an issue that, really the majority of the grade is feeling, we will sit down and work with Adriana and we'll say, okay, we've recognized that we've heard a lot of conversations revolving around this topic. For next week's Future Ready lesson, can we, do something different? So I think that's another way, is just trying to keep them engaged so that it's, really intentional and it's timely to what's going on in their lives.
Sorry, one final.
Jeannie?
Have you had any feedback from the parents? Are they seeing any results of your, especially the mental health issue, helping them at home?
I would say a lot of that feedback will come as a result of the end of the year Future Ready conference.
Okay.
So over the course of the year, we don't get a ton of feedback from parents in regards to, oh hey, so Johnny came home and was talking about his Future Ready lesson. And we can't get him to talk about math. But at the end of the year Future Ready conference, there have been parents that have shared that like there have been, especially that career clusters piece where students have come home and talked about potential future pathways and interests beyond middle school.
Okay.
Let me get back to you in a second. Eric, anything? No. Ann?
I'm good, thank you.
Jeannie?
I'm good.
Steve? Larry, you got another one?
Yes, okay, so obviously
I'll get to
it's
you.
pre-budget here, right? So, and again, I kind of don't want to put John on the spot, but if you thought about what was there, and it looked like there were some things where you guys had to change and modify a few things, but is there something that would be beneficial or helpful, either, I don't know, what do you call it, some packages or material that you guys could purchase, or anything else that we could potentially consider or should think about as we go into next year's budget? And you don't have to answer the questions today, but I think if something like that, if you guys are thinking about it, because I think that what I'm hearing you say is that there's a substantial impact in terms of the student achievement, student learning, with a direct correlation in terms of some of the components of the SEL and other aspects of that. And obviously from the Future Ready, I mean, that's really what we're all about, is opening that door to each child's future, right? So how do we kind of go about doing that and make sure that we have in place the right kind of resources and materials? And again, so if you have something that you want to beg and deal with John on, you can do that, but you don't have to answer the question necessarily. But I think it's just something to think about. How do you make sure that we have the right stuff for you guys to be able to address those student needs that are out there? So.
I think the stuff we are currently using is the right stuff. I think, however, part of continuous improvement is looking at what you're doing each year and how do you make it better. I think like the number one factor that we've always run into is we have 2 school counselors and we have a lot of kids, right? And I think the kids have said that they value that face time, and we have had to get creative with some in-person, virtual, even though they're in the building, just so that we can deliver this to all of our students. But I mean, to have them face to face and to either have more people trained to engage in this type of teaching would be most beneficial, because kids want to be in the classroom with the person that's instructing.
Casey, anything?
Not a question. I just want to commend you, especially for one of those last comments that you made about your desire to be relevant constantly, so that if you have to pivot, you pivot. And I really do appreciate that. The world is changing so fast for these kids that I can't even imagine.
Does Edmund have anything?
Oh, I just really appreciate your presentation. Thank you. It's really important. We know that learning's a lot more than math and reading and those kinds of things. It's about working with others. It's about having goals. It's about being organized. It's about being resilient, right? All those kinds of things. And people learn when their needs are taken care of, when they're healthy, they're happy, they're well adjusted, they're confident. When people are in those positions, they learn. And so direct impact on learning is not surprising when these are things that we work on. So thank you for your work with our students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Good presentation, a little gift from Courage to stand in front of.
Thank
you very much for coming. So
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all very much. Next on the agenda is the COVID update.
All right. Well, I don't have any real visuals for you. We did a lot of work on this the last time, just some updates. Things are going really well. We have been, you recall at the last meeting you approved an updated plan that simplified our color-coded model. We've been in the green category for the last 6 days. I would expect we will be again tomorrow. We currently, for tomorrow, have 1 active case projected in the entire district among students and 0 for staff in terms of absences COVID related. So we have very little in terms of COVID going on around here. So, things are going well, and we don't really have any changes with the exception of new CDC guidance on masking that you may be aware of that came out last week. we're really reducing the recommendations related to masking, and that includes eliminating the requirement for masking on buses. So we'll no longer be requiring masking for students on buses, which, as you know, had been a federal requirement prior to this change. So that
Has that
change.
taken place already? Or
Correct. We haven't, I mean, this just happened
I
at
know. I was
the
wondering
end
what
of
the
last
deal-
week.
yeah.
We had some communication with the bus company that it's, there's nothing, they're not to be enforcing that as of today. We'll communicate that with parents, but I wanted to be able to have the update with the board first. So that's the one change that's in place. And again, it's another step towards more and more normalcy, which is what we all want. I'll take any questions that you have. Otherwise, that would be my update.
Anybody?
That was the only question I was going to ask was about the busing, so thank you for covering it.
Mike, do you still have the classes at the elementary school where masks are required? Are they staying?
No, those were, just to refresh everybody, there was opt-in. As you guys think back to last summer, we opened it up to families who wanted to opt into a mask section. And at the time that was established, we had said once those students were eligible for full vaccination that we would revisit that. And so I think it was right at the start of semester 2. We may have, with the Omicron kind of surge, we may have delayed, I think, a week or so. And then we, in those classes, they became mask recommended. So students wear them as they do in the rest of the school environment if they choose to. But there's no longer mask required sections.
Anyone else? No? All right, thank you, Michael. Citizen comments. Julie, do you have any slips? I do not. Okay. Then we get down to salutes and recognitions. I signed a bunch of them from last time. We had a bunch last meeting. I'll open it up to school board members. Steve, you want to start off?
I hope I don't steal anyone's thunder.
Okay.
I checked with one person to make sure I wasn't going to do that. But. So let's start out with some fun stuff. So Sarah Newcomer, 1,000 points. I know that Stacy will sit over there and she'll say that basketball is a team sport and we shouldn't be calling out the accomplishments of any one player, but that's an incredible accomplishment. It shows not only a high level of capability, but for a long period of time to get to that level. So that means someone had to start as a freshman to get to 1,000 points by the time they get their senior year. So congratulations to Sarah. And I can't, of course, we can't let it go past that Josh Terrian, 19-year record?
19.
I think it's 19-year record, right? Highest
19
points
years.
scored. Again, obviously, I remember watching Josh when he was a freshman play, and what a great character he was then and what a great player he is today. Really enjoyed Wednesday night's game. Josh came on the court. He only scored 3 points all game, but he did everything else that you would want a basketball player to do in that game. And he's awesome. Love watching him play. Let's move to Caleb Sniff, 5th place in juniors in Saturday's huge-ass fat bike race at Black Hawk. I saw Caleb and his dad there. We had a great time, and it was a wonderful day to be out riding bikes. Jacob Brunner, Caleb Cady, Andrew Martin, Josh Moore, and Connor Tubin for making it to state in wrestling. Congratulations to those guys. Phenomenal to get to state level competition.
Let's hear it for them.
Yeah. And then my last one that I'll do is, James Sevens has done 42 productions at our wonderful Performing Arts Center. And this was the first one he's ever directed, the production. So the drama program put on their spring musical. It was awesome. It was Annie. Loved the show. Great cast. And congratulations to James for directing his first musical.
Cool.
Should we salute Gus?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Gus, who
Gus the dog.
came in as our Sandy. That was kind of a scene stealer a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve.
Those are what I had.
Anyone else? Eric?
Yeah, I will. I want to give a salute to the academic decathlon team. They took 2nd place in Division II, and I don't know if people realize. I didn't realize it up until recently. They have to take 7 different tests in art, economics, literature, mathematics, music, science, and social studies. They also have to write an essay, give a prepared speech, give an impromptu speech, and be interviewed in front of 2 judges before participating in the super quiz relay. I mean, that's pretty, I don't know. I wouldn't want to do all that. And those students, Ryan Nigan, Lance Sun, Chase Barrow, Ben Varner, Andy Kornitz, Paige Frisky, Kate Lasko, Madeline Davis, and Gaurav Sachdeva. I hope I said that right. And then a couple of individuals. Ryan Nigan earned a bronze in speech. Chase Barrow for taking gold in interview. Ben Varner won a bronze in science. Andy Kornitz with a bronze in both math and social science, as well as a 3rd place overall in the scholastic category. And then a special shout out to the senior team captain, Kate Lasko. So that's what I have.
Awesome.
That's great, Eric, thanks. Ann, anybody?
I'm good today.
Larry?
Nope, I'm good.
Stacy? You guys good? Okay. Turn it over to administrators.
You know, I did talk to Kathy Walls today, and so that's interesting. They were like back and forth. I think it was them and New Berlin West. Like they beat New Berlin West twice, and New Berlin West beat them twice. But of course, one of them that New Berlin West beat them was in the state championship. But yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that crew up as well. And Danielle, former academic coach herself, jumped in and helped in a shortage of transportation between wrestlers at state and everything else to help drive kids to the Dells for that. So I'd like to salute Danielle for jumping in and helping out the squad. But that's all I have for tonight.
John, Daniel? Well, thank you for that. That takes us down to the consent agenda. We have minutes from business affairs and regular meeting from the last meeting, February 14th. I don't think there is any correspondence, but we do have some gifts there that were in your board pack. Unless there's questions or corrections, I'll look for a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, I don't know who got that, but. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. That takes us down to new business, something that we look at every year. It's the cooperative contract with the Waukesha County Schools, and I think Anthony's here if you have any questions for him on this. We see you.
This is a list of services that we contract with CISA 1 for every year. The majority of those are through Student Services, Anthony's department. All the information is in your packet in terms of those services. There's nothing, Tony, no real changes, right, from previous years in terms of the services that we contract with CISA 1 for. So again, Tony's here if you have any specific questions. Otherwise, we would seek a motion to approve the agreement.
Stacy, any questions?
I do not.
Eric?
I don't.
Ann? No. Jeannie?
No.
Steve?
Just thanks for your work, Anthony, with this. It's an important resource for our students. Thank you.
Larry, you good?
No, I'm good.
I'll look for a motion then.
I'll move to approve the Waukesha County Special Education Cooperative Contract for the 2022-23 school year as presented.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? 7-0. Next item relates to our strategic plan, one of the goals for getting renewed in our Baldridge Award here. So I'll let Danielle and Mike take over.
Yeah, so this is Superintendent Goal F that was established for me by the board at the start of the year regarding Baldridge excellent process and potential future application. As you will all recall, we won the national award back in 2013. Background is, I think 2 years ago, this appeared as a goal, and I was asked to work with Liz Menzer to create a 3-year timeline and looking at a new application. Then that completely got put on ice as we went through the pandemic. So we're kind of reinitiating this process. So I included in your materials, really an updated timeline. I have not spoken with Liz yet about that. I basically just moved what was in the timeline up to the current calendar dates, so that we had something to work from. And then a step in that process was the Baldrige criteria training that a number of you in this room participated in last week. So I've asked Danielle to kind of give a summary, and for those board members that were there as well, to please feel free to just jump in terms of the training that happened last week.
Yeah, so last Thursday and Friday, a handful of us from the district went through kind of either training for the first time or retraining for some of us that are old and have been around for a while. And so Larry and Eric and Stacy were there as well, so I would welcome any comments that you guys have on it as well. But the 2 days we spent going through each of the areas of the Baldrige criteria, and really kind of broke down each area by looking at what is it asking, and what are the processes involved in that. And then we were able to take a look at where were we in 2013. We had our 2013 application and feedback reports with us, and what was the feedback that we had in 2013. What has changed since then? What do we need to start thinking about, and where are opportunities for us to continue to improve already? And so we were able to do that with each of the sections and then have a group conversation around that, led by our facilitator who we were able to bring in. So I thought that the 2 days had a lot of rich conversation. I think for people, I don't want to speak for those of you that had never experienced Baldrige before, but my sense is that people who didn't ever know what it even was left feeling with a better handle on the criteria and what it was that it was looking for. And for those of us that have experienced it, and experienced it with us here in the district, it was a good reminder of the criteria, and it was a nice opportunity to do some reflection about where we've come in the last 9 years since we won the award, and some opportunities for us. So it was encouraging to see a lot of the feedback pieces that have accomplished as well. So I think if we were to look at doing another application, there would be opportunities for us to update that and address the feedback areas that they had identified last time.
Anybody have any questions? Or do you want to comment on the training?
Yeah, I will. I had no Baldrige experience. And I think as a school district, it's hard to know where you're going unless you know where you've come from and where you are currently. And I think Baldrige kind of addresses some of that and gives you a roadmap to get where you want to be. So I found the training to be very informative. Like I said, had no experience, so I thought it was 2 days well spent.
Anybody else?
For me, Baldrige is very similar to the strategies we used when I was in public accounting as far as giving management advice. So it was not concepts that were foreign to me. The 2 days were so valuable to me, though, because of the in-depth conversations I was able to have with some of the district administrators, and just being able to understand better some of the processes that we have in place. So that was really awesome for me to have that time, and like you said, like just really rich conversations that did a lot. And I have to say, to toot your horns, because I wasn't around, the trainer was taking so many notes based on the conversations that we were having. So I think he was just gleaning things from our conversations about what this district is doing and what we've accomplished.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good session too, and I want to echo what Stacy just commented on. I mean, we had folks, Amanda, Lindsay, and Pete, and Anthony was there, and Colin, and Danielle, obviously, in terms of, so the dialogue and the discussion that was going back and forth was really helpful, because, I mean, there's a lot of things that have changed since the 2013 application. So that's one of the things we're gonna have to be very careful or cognizant of, is that what we had written in 2013, there's a basis for it, but the criteria have changed, plus a lot of things that we have done. I mean, and Steve, for example, was very fascinated with the graduate profile stuff on the back wall, and I know he was pursuing that one. He's like got some purpose behind him for that. And I think actually, because he was involved in working with us when we wrote the first applications or early on with this. What's that? Yeah, so he was pretty intimate and knowledgeable of what we were doing, but I think he just kept kind of taking notes, as Stacy said, and saying, wow, this is good, this is good, this is good kind of stuff. But I think we also picked up some comments from either Lindsay or Amanda, and I don't remember which one of them said it, but that they could tell that this was a different school district because of the systematized processes and how we do things, and it was just like, oh, well, we have a process for that, or, oh, we have a process for that. So, I mean, that was kind of reinforcing to hear that coming from some of our newer administrative people that were with us only a couple of years now in terms of working with the organization. So with that, other than it's a lot of work, and I don't want to ever underestimate that, but my closing comments is, you know, really when you think about the performance excellence, the Baldrige Award kind of process, focusing on what we call leadership, the strategic planning, the workforce components of that, our focus on our customers, our students, and then also the operational aspects of it and the data that we use to manage our district produces results. And yes, there's the results in the context of the data that we report out, but at the same time, in my head, it always comes back to what happens to the students in the classrooms, those that start out with us in the 4K program and ultimately reach that graduation point. I mean, to me, that's the ultimate, because we want to make sure that we give them the very, very, very best education that we possibly can to help make sure that they do have those doors open for whatever they want to do with their careers and with their lives. And I think that's the depth and the breadth of the spectrum of what we offer within the Pewaukee School District, and I think we got to be proud of that. I mean, the day that we were there, and I think there was in the last DA's report, I mean, there's like not meetings, but there's requests to come in and visit our 4K classrooms. Well, and I think in one of the documents that we had, like, 50 people came and visited the school district, or on the back of the room that we were in, the maps that we had, the number of states and school districts from around the country and even international, either where somebody spoke or they came and visited us, is very, very impactful. So, I mean, the Pewaukee School District is kind of like a force out there, if you will, to champion high-quality education for all students that we serve out there. So, and that's, again, it's kind of like, okay, is that a living legacy kind of thing? Absolutely, but it's really what we do for the kids and what their futures are gonna hold for them. So it will be work, and I'm kind of guessing, Danielle, you might be the point person on this, but we'll have to talk more about what that all means. Superintendent goals become somebody else's goals. I think you described that well. But it was a great discussion, good group, and Steve did cover a lot of things. My only kind of maybe reflection in terms of what wasn't necessarily covered, he didn't necessarily talk a whole lot about the points, but he said he's working with organizations of what do you look like if you're at the 200-point level, the 400-point level, 600, 700, and I don't know how many ever even get to the 800, but that rubric that's in there in terms of the rubric being based on the approach, the deployment, and the cycles of learning with the processes you have in place, and then the integration. And the same thing with the results. It's the levels, it's the trends, it's the comparisons, and also our integration of that as well. And I think those are the things that you really think about how we measure our performance and measure our results as a district. And again, maybe it reflects on us, but it reflects mostly on the work that goes on day to day in every one of our single classrooms that we serve here. So I'm excited about it, Brian. If you haven't figured that out, I think this would be good. I wish the timeline were a little sooner, faster, but I understand it, and that's not the point. It's really about what we do every single day here, and if we can use the framework and use the processes approach, because I think we're doing great things, and we want to continue to do great things for our kids in this district. So, thank you, Brian. That's all.
All right. Any other comments? I hesitate to ask.
Larry's already stepped off his soapbox. He's done.
All right, let's.
Thank you, Stacy.
Well, it's how we live, so it's an important process. It takes us down to personnel issues. This might be the only time I don't see any personnel issues.
No resignations, no retirements, no employments, no leaves.
Okay, wow. Board goals and operations. Our next meeting is March 14th, where there'll be no policy, but there will be business affairs. Then we have the National School Board Conference. I think we're all set for that. There's the Insight evaluations. I don't know if we settled on a time, Julie? Or day, I should say day, right?
Well, we've got 4 different days that we can pick from. So March 16th, 18th, 29th, or 31st.
Were our responses all over the board?
They're all over the board, but that's okay.
Okay.
How many do they want?
Well, he only wants to do 1 session.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I apologize, Lou.
That's
Julie, I answered it differently.
That's okay. So we can kind of just pick maybe when the most people come.
I'm fine with that, of course, yeah.
What was the last part?
I said maybe,
Majority.
yeah, pick a date.
I mean, he's not hoping for a certain number of people. It's
He
just,
just would like a couple more.
sure, okay.
All right. Then, April 11th, we've got, business affairs and a board meeting, then the 25th, policies back and a board meeting as well. I don't know, in that time frame, are there any WASB presentations or sessions that anybody know about? Okay.
No, other than, well, coming up in the spring, there'll be these new school board, we're hosting some of those here.
Yeah, what is the date of that? Julie, when we're hosting the,
You're right. It's the 19th.
yeah, that's right.
What is it?
19th, okay.
April 19th?
April
It's the
19th.
it's the WASB, kind of our region, new board member reception. We'll have it right up here.
All right, legislative advocacy discussion here. There were a whole bunch of bills that were issued recently, and it's kind of interesting because you went to the blog for WASB. There were 19 bills that passed one house or the other. WASB supported 2 of them, had no position on 5, and opposed 12 of them. So it doesn't bode well for school districts, I don't think. But there are some in there that are more worrisome than others, particularly the one we talked about last time, where anybody in the middle of your district could opt out of being in the district. So I think that your organization, Larry, actually create a brief on the problems with that, right?
I don't remember
Boardman and
exactly.
Clark brief, yeah, so.
Yeah, there's been in terms of a volume standpoint, just a lot of legislation that's been kind of pushed through in the last couple of weeks. I would anticipate the vast majority of it's going to be vetoed. I think some of this is kind of the politics of the season, right? It's the end of the session. And so that's some of it. But there's things to certainly be, keeping aware of. And I think the issue, some things have reasonable concepts behind them. And when you look at the details and the issues that they would create, those are things we have to be aware of and continue to communicate with our legislators of concern. So we're paying attention to those things, and we have a pretty good relationship in particular with Representative Nayland. So, I think we'll probably be reaching out to him again. But it is really the end of the session. I don't expect anything new to be coming out. At least that's what we were hearing at our SWSA meeting. So, but yes, there's been a lot of activity.
Anybody have anything to say about that? Before we ask Dr. Katie to do a strategic planning process update, it looks like people are leaning towards Wednesday, May 25th for that strategic planning, but we haven't heard from Eric. So does May 25th work for you?
It was the 18th or the 25th.
Yeah.
So.
Most people said they had the preference for the 25th,
25th.
looks like.
Yeah, the 25th works fine.
All good?
Stacy, does
Stacy,
that
you
work for
good?
you? The 25th?
Yes,
Yeah. 25th?
both of them actually worked for me,
Okay.
so
Okay.
it didn't matter.
Julie, 25th? Thank you. Your turn.
Yeah, I mean, that was really the primary piece, is just to send you some information. The board approved kind of a revised strategic planning process last spring. And so now we're at that stage in year 1 of the 3-year process with our new 3-year plan. So the next step is to host a a single community feedback session, which will be that 3-hour session that you just chose the date on the 25th. So I wanted to make sure you had that background and information, and to solidify a date and to make you aware of the upcoming event. So we'll have that feedback session, which will be really important. At that session, we will have the key work systems, the 6 key work systems, Tony, Danielle, Colin, and others. Have some breakouts and talk about the progress of their their plans as to where it stands at that time, and so we can solicit some input from student, staff, community, parents at that time. So looking forward to that opportunity. Then the next major event with strategic planning gets us to Leadership Week in the summer, where our process owners will then revise and update the plans and really create the year 2 tactical plans to support their 3-year goals. The other piece that's coming up shortly at our upcoming administrative team meeting, all of the process owners will be doing 90-day cycle of improvement updates to the team. So that's just another step in the accountability process with our framework. I'll take any questions that you have, but the primary goal tonight was to make sure we solidified a date for the community feedback event. Steve?
I have a question. During Leadership Week, is there a feedback mechanism? Is that part of what's in that week where representatives of the leadership team provide feedback for each other on how those elements are going and what they would recommend in terms of changes? And is that what that is?
Yeah, there's a couple of pieces. So that week starts with a lot of data review.
Okay.
So Candace will present all of our perceptual data, our achievement data. We'll look at financials, all of those kinds of pieces that are relevant. Any of the feedback, so we'll reflect back on the feedback we received from the event in May, and any metrics or measures that are in the PDSA action plans through the year 1 tactical plans on those 3-year goals. So all of that, so we kind of debrief the year. Everybody talks about the progress that was made in their first year for feedback. We look at the current data and use that to then now to kind of create that second year chunk.
Got it.
With that second year tactical plan of those 3-year goals.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yep.
I had a question about that the session. Is there a number? I've been involved with it for a long time.
Yep.
And my perception is that our participation has gone down, COVID year aside. Is there a number, like a target number we have of we'd like to have come? Is there a cap? Like we really don't want to get over this amount because it would be too hard to
good question. There's no cap. I think we'd love to see 50 people here or more. I think the updated process that the board approved may be helpful. I think we were kind of doing a full-fledged multi-night process every year, which wasn't really necessary because we had multi-year goals. So this will be more condensed. So I think it seems to be increasingly difficult to get people to show up to things in the evenings. We've seen that with all kinds of events, whether it be AODA, parent events, to other kinds of meetings. So we do actively recruit and reach out to people. You were always on that list, Stacy. That's why, especially with your involvement with PTO and Booster. So we go to lists like that to directly invite people and put information out, but there's no cap. The more, the better in terms of participation. So.
Okay, then my
Yep.
follow-up to that is, I believe everybody in this room would know that a personal invitation is harder to say no to.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we can all take a list, whether we create it or
It's a great idea.
the administrators create it, and actually make phone calls. I know I'm dating myself, picking up a phone,
But you
dialing
mean like
numbers.
talking to someone on a phone?
Like talking to somebody on the phone and actually inviting them.
Now, if we can get our students to do that.
That'll never happen.
It
but-
actually worked for me last time, Stacy, so I invited a couple of particular community members and they showed up. It was virtual, but they were there, so
Okay.
it did work.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
So
And
I'm
we can,
suggesting something and hoping you'll all volunteer, I guess is what I'm saying.
well, what we could do is, at an upcoming agenda, maybe at one of the April meetings, we could look at the list that we've had, and maybe even in between, Julie and I could send something out and say, here's who we have on kind of Joanne always called it the key communicators list. So you'd have this list of folks that tend to be really involved. We also tend to reach out to, I think, our Insight mentors and volunteers quite a bit. The hardest part is getting community involvement. That's not
Like
apparent.
non-parents.
Yeah, that's always a tough one. And we try to have a balance with students and staff and there so that we get different perspectives. But I like your idea. So we could try to put a list together, and then maybe everybody commits to. I'll call 5 people. So
Exactly.
That's
That's
great.
what I was thinking. Yep.
Thank
Just a couple quick either comments on that. I agree with you, because sometimes, I think it's important for us to recognize that we have either some key business partners that are out there, or I remember one time, I think, County Executive Farrow was there, and we also had the mayor of the city of Pewaukee came, and this was like a few years ago, obviously, but even like the WCTC president guy, I think that sometimes we can benefit from having some folks with a different perspective or a different level of their knowledge of what's going on in the county and the region. Might be helpful to have them participate with us in terms of these activities, so.
yeah, great idea.
Great.
So that's all I had for the update this time. Oh, Khadijah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering, because I know you said that you shifted to have the meeting once a year. Has there been like a way of kind of assessing if like that has been a better option, or kind of will there be one?
Well, it depends on which year in the process we are. So what we did was we created a 3-year process. So we just went through the full-fledged process last year with the community survey, multiple stakeholder meetings, all the students. We had multiple nights. We had the Saturday retreat. We did all of those things. So we had the full process last year. This is kind of just an update. So that's why the one night this year. And then as we get, this is kind of the way it is for 2 years, and then we go back into the full process every 3rd year. So this is and to your question, this is the first year we're doing it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Good? Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Next thing I put on the agenda, evaluating board meeting efficiency. This kind of connects to the whole Baldrige thing. Little survey that got developed by WASB.
Thank you. Good catch.
And it's actually 10 pages, so I'm not sure they want to do this every time. I'm thinking that this might be something that we do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Once, maybe twice a year for feedback. So, sorry guys, part of the Baldrige thing, as you learned in your training session, is to get that feedback and, act upon it, to plan, do, study, that kind of thing. So, I'm not gonna labor the discussion here. I think if you could look at it at your leisure, maybe we'll bring it up at the next meeting under board goals and operations to see what we want to do there. But I think it's just a way that maybe we can have a process for our own improvement as we manage these meetings.
So at this point, you just want to discuss it? You don't want us to actually fill it out?
Well, I think if we decide to do this, what we'd have to do, because there's 10 pages, we'd have to create like a Survey Monkey or something like that, and get that feedback in there, and then maybe Candace can
Gotcha. So
manage it
this is
for us.
just for us to review and
Yeah, so
decide.
this is
Okay.
just, at this moment, it's just a review.
Okay.
We'll decide whether we want to go forward, and then how many times a year to do it, and then we'll figure out the mechanics of it later.
Well, it is 10 pages, but it's 2 different surveys. So there's 3 pages or 4 pages around evaluating multiple meetings. And then there are exact same questions for evaluating just a single meeting, or, I don't know if they're exactly the same, but they're,
They're pretty close.
they're pretty close. So it's really half of that is what it
So the
is.
single meeting, would that be, we would literally evaluate like tonight's meeting?
Yeah,
Is that what?
it looks like
Yeah,
it.
I just think that to evaluate every single meeting we have with 5 pages might get laborious.
Yeah, it's 30 questions and they look identical, so, yeah.
Okay.
But I didn't want to skimp, so
I think it's great. I think it's a great concept, right? So, I think it's a great concept to bring forward and for us to think about where some opportunities are.
This is rather extensive, but the questions on page 6, the 28, 29, and 30 were ones that I guess in my work setting, we either typically use or have used for years and years in terms of just a quick go around, kind of saying, okay, if there were any concerns, whatever it was, just to be more reflective in terms of when we talk about evaluating meetings, do we do it? But without going through all of this, because otherwise, boy, this would be a lot of questions to answer, but, just
That's why I didn't think we should do it every time.
yeah.
All right. So let's ponder that. I'll put it back on the next agenda and get feedback. Maybe not all the questions are relevant to us. Maybe you want to add a question. But I think it's good so that we can still model that continuous improvement on the board level for meetings.
Speaking of that, I probably will not be here on March 14th. Is that our next meeting?
The March 14th is.
Yeah.
So, Julie, did you get that? Are you going to try to remote in?
I will see if my schedule will allow it, but
Just a reminder that John will be running that meeting, Danielle and I will be gone at a work conference.
Yep, okay. All right, next item, unless there's more comments there, under board goals and operations. Okay. Otherwise, comments from citizens, Julie, any sheets? All right. Well, now I need to have a motion to go into closed session according to State Statute 19.85, paren 1, paren C, compensation consideration for confidential support staff.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second?
All right, now we have to do a roll call. Stacy?
Yes.
Larry?
yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Jeannie?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
We are now in closed session. Thanks for coming tonight.